So I just got done watching Patrick Tomaso's The Making of Project Hail Mary with DP Greg Fraser with Greg Fraser. So it's an hour-long interview with Patrick and Greg Fraser talking about how he shot Project Hail Mary. Something really interesting stood out to me. It was the visual reference that Greg Fraser showed to Ryan Gosling as this is the film that we're going to make. As a director, it's so useful to have that one-to-one reference to find that existing piece that is closest to what you're trying to achieve so that everyone can be on the same page. And it helps in the edit, it helps on set, it helps when you're trying to get the idea over the line to begin with and bought into by the people who are going to help you make it. I want to look at the reference that Greg Fraser showed to Ryan Gosling. It was this. All is Full of Love by Björk, and it's the music video, and it's directed by Chris Cunningham. And if you know your music video lore, Chris Cunningham was one of the really groundbreaking experimental music video directors. Did a lot with Björk, did a lot with Aphex Twin, and came up with some absolutely nuts visuals and abstract ways of telling a story. And I want to break this down from a story and edit perspective. So a little bit of a departure from the commercial stuff, but I think it's important to see different mediums in order to get good at filmmaking in general. You got to know your references because, hey, this music video turned into Project Hail Mary, so maybe it'll turn into your next ad. It's interesting. I'm not going to go into the cinematography for this, but I can see Project Hail Mary in this music video. I think it's in the silhouette stuff. Obviously, this is all high future sci-fi. Greg Fraser described it as like Japanese sci-fi stuff, and it's obviously not the same palette in any way as Project Hail Mary. The light pollution, all the light leak stuff, that does work. Anyway, we're not talking about cinematography. Here's how you can make an abstract music video. So this is 4 minutes long. I'm just going to skip to the good bits. But if you remember the last episode, we talked about setting up the story, and revealing from black is a great way to do that. It sounds like I'm stating the obvious, but think about the logic there of beginning from black. If you're watching this on a screen, the device itself begins on a black screen. So you're living in the thing being off, and you are bringing the audience into the thing being on. You are starting in an absence of light, and then you are creating light to enter the scene. It's not rocket science, but it's a good way, very traditional way, to get into a story. I'm going to turn the music on here. Listen to this. See what happens when the intro ends and the music begins. We talked on the last episode about your edit being like a roller coaster. Something that has a lot of mileage in telling a story is synchronizing audio to video, especially if you're working without dialogue. That's something that this music video relies on a lot. And look how they've begun the story. This intro fade in happens in our establishing shot that gives us the world. Starts on these wires and shows the laboratory where Björk is getting made. But when the song actually begins, think about, this is like the night, this is the lab is off right now, but we've got to bring the lab to life, and the song is also going to come to life, and we're going to do that at the exact same moment. Audio can draw attention in a way that's faster than your eyes can work. Sometimes you can have a shot that in silence is too fast, but when you put sound design under it, it becomes very consumable. And so something like a drum, which is our first instrument, the hit of a drum being timed with these robot arms coming to life creates this sense of momentum for the audience. This idea of the edit being a roller coaster. We've had the very slow start where we're just getting out of the bit where you get into the seat, and now the roller coaster's beginning, and we're away. So we're steady. Let's carry on. Now this sort of harp instrument, I don't know if it's a harp, if it's what's the one? There's like a harp type thing that you hit with mallets. A zither? I don't know. But listen. It's a little bit loose, but the lights come on at roughly the same time. It could be more closely synchronized, but maybe on this one they weren't going for it. There are much more obvious sync points as the edit carries on. But at least in this gap, we've got the music just progressing at one level. That little zither sound effect gives us something new, and we give something new in the visuals as well. Now I want to draw attention to this. I think this is interesting. So we've got, still in our establishing shot, we're just pushing forward. Then we've got this static. And then we cut to a wider. Now some people would say, or if you were building this edit yourself, you might think that this is a weird jump cut. And it is, really. I would be trying to problem solve my way out of this. But look at what function this shot serves. Bearing in mind also this is for a music video, so you need to introduce the talent. This shot does the job of, in the story, it wakes the robot up so that the robot is ready to sing. But it also pulls our focus in to the idea of, hey, for this one, Björk's a robot. Just letting you know, Björk's a robot on this one. So we are just on the face, we see some movement, the arms and the things moving around her, that's all dressing, that's continued on from this stuff. We know that these robot arms are moving anyway, so that's kind of keeping the world continuous, but the new element is Björk's eyes opening and her face opening. And they've clearly done some kind of like face replace thing here where they've, put like white powder on Björk's face and nose and lips, and then just masked and motion tracked that onto the thing. But he's done a shot the way that he has decided to do it, and there is a million ways that you could do it, but this is how Chris has decided to do it, is just start on a static, this portrait sort of shot, and then cut wider. Yeah, it's a jump cut, but you know what? The guy did Rubber Johnny, he doesn't care. To see now what the robots are doing. And in 3 shots, you've got this idea of, well, in 2 shots, you've got this idea of, here's our singer, and they're being operated on. And that's how you guide the audience into a crazy idea. You take them one step at a time. So we've established the world, we've had the robot wake up, and then we get the robot singing. And now the audience is like, cool, I don't really need to know anything else, I'll just see where this goes. But you've got them into the world. So I was talking before about these zither elements and this section being timed, but not like note for note timed. Every time you hear that zither, you get machinery spinning round. We're going to see that a few times. Let's talk about that spinning though. So we've got layers of story in any film, and part of your job as a director is to make your film feel full. So I always try to, when I'm at the top of a film and I haven't gotten into my development yet, I'm thinking, what are my layers? And you need layers that start from simple and range through to a development of that. I'm reluctant to say complex because it doesn't need to be complex, but you need to think about the stuff that is obvious to show and then the stuff that is less obvious to show. There's more good examples of this later in the edit as well. But one of the things that he's using as a motif is this idea of these servos and motors and things spinning whenever you hear that gyro sound effect. Gyro? I don't know why I said gyro. I think I was thinking about other words for motors. Harp, zither, whatever. And then there's another decision that you have to make as the director as well, which is how much do I actually need to explain? We've seen that robot arms are operating on Björk. Do we need to actually know what this is doing? Because they've gone to the hard work of making it spin. Maybe so that Chris Cunningham can communicate it to his team. He might be like, yeah, these are injecting the hydraulic fluid into Björk. But the audience don't necessarily need to know that. They just need to know that, because we're probably already familiar with the idea of like robot arms operating on, we've seen Star Wars and things like that. So we don't need to know more than, oh yeah, the robots are just doing robot stuff to build Björk, of course. But look how he's just used an opportunity to take one element of the world and give it a function within the song, and also like play for time a little bit. Like let's see a few things happen in this film that's not all just Björk singing. So that brings me to my next one, because this shot, this would be the simplest idea within the thing, just shots of robot Björk singing lines of the song. And the way that I would approach this as a director, knowing that I would have to see it through to the edit, is take the entire song and decide what lines do I want to have in this category. Which parts of the song do I want to, when I'm storyboarding, which lines don't need to be any more complicated than just Björk sings this line. Because again, with the audience thing, you need to guide them by the hand, and part of that is by bringing them back to stuff that they already know and they understand, so that you can then keep them grounded in the story, then take them away and teach them a little bit more about the world that you're going to develop them into. So you need something to drive the simple story so that abstract layers can live on top of it. And the more abstract you go is down to you as a director. I think one of the easy things that you can do is start with, well, what's the obvious story? What are the things that are happening around that? What are the micro and the macro elements? And then where it gets fun is, okay, well, where am I going to take this artistically? And you can keep gear shifting through those different narratives, almost like a sort of intercut sequence. If you just have like multiple scenes and you just need to cut them together in a montage, that's effectively what we're doing. Now, we spent near enough the first minute setting up the story, but we need to get somewhere in the next 3 minutes. Like, we can't be working at this pace, so we need a little time jump. Look at what he does here. Rule of 3. 1, 2, 3, and then a couple of blinky shots, and we're time jumped on a little bit. So sometimes you need to just live in one of your little layers so that you can move the simple story onwards a little bit. Think of it as like you're in shot or you're out shot or pivoting to something or taking yourself away. Again, we don't really need to know what the function of all these different screws and liquids and fluids are, and what even is this? Let's go through it. Because bear in mind, they had to put time into picking this up on the shoot day. What have we actually got here? What have we just looked at? A light wash, a fade to white, back down into another sort of like light turning on or off, bit of a blink. Some sort of like weird additive cross dissolve, like a darker dissolve here, or at least a dip, not necessarily a dissolve, but just like a exposure's been brought down for like one frame, and then we're back up. So little glimpsey bit of something to teleport us forward. Once you establish an idea, move on from the idea. And he's established that Robot Björk is a thing, singing, getting operated on. Cool, well, we need to get to the next bit now. So throw in a little bit of eye candy, and then we're on to this. Look at that. what you're really doing as an editor is building a reliable foundation of logic for your audience so that they can follow the story. When an audience loses interest is when nothing means anything. And even in a music video as abstract as this, you can have meaning just by having certain things happening at certain times consistently, association, linking one thing to another, and just making that something that the audience learns once, sees a second time, and then realizes they can come to expect it. And then the fun can begin because you can break that expectation. So they've already kind of done it here, because up until this point, whenever we heard that little harp sound effect, it was always one of those little nozzles turning, one of the arms. This time it was a part of her body, but it was still turning. So one of the variables has stayed the same, one of the variables has changed. So you're teaching the audience to follow, but because they've already been introduced to that idea, they stay locked in. And you also are timing it with sound design and the music of the instruments in the song. So you just got to keep those breadcrumbs close enough together, and they'll follow you anywhere. Now, this is really interesting to me. I think part of becoming good at what you do is watching stuff that's new to you, exposing yourself to new materials, and also seeing stuff that you don't understand. So we are at the sort of 90-second mark, just over, in this 4-minute music video. Björk has met another Björk. They're about to fall in love. I don't know where this comes from. Why, in this story of a robot getting built and falling in love with her twin, why would she pay attention to fluids dripping up in reverse? I don't think that this is real world. I don't think that she's actually sat in some lab where water flows backwards. I think there is a intentional look from one place to the other here into that cut of the fluid. I think that is intentional, but I don't think it's to say that she's literally looking at that fluid. I think the fluid is way more metaphorical. I don't really know what the metaphor is. But that's part of the fun of watching new stuff, right? Seeing cool stuff that you don't get, and it works. Maybe there's if I'm to just infer as I'm watching it, because she looks across, sees it, because it's kind of coolish of effects, isn't it? If you have a shot of someone going, and then you cut to a thing, the assumption is that they are looking at that thing. But look what happens. Reverses up, and then she blinks and closes her eyes. So maybe it's like a memory or a thought, or it takes more of that place in the relationship to her. But then we go into 2 more shots. Also, by the way, I love these like scatty, randomly framed. There's a name for the design style, and I can't remember what it is, but you know those like old PlayStation adverts and that design aesthetic from like the 90s or the 90s maybe, that's all about these kind of low contrast, very clinical, but also kind of like dingy graphics. Very cool look. But look, reversing fluid and then sort of seeing it much more broadly going up the robot's chassis. And then, but now we're just back into story world. It's like now she just is doing something very surface level. She's going to look up and see the robot. I have a theory about what the fluid represents. But the theory only holds water, no pun intended. Shortly. Right now, it doesn't mean anything. But that's okay. That's mystery. That's intrigue. And now there is an idea of these robots being connected. Is this water in reverse flowing up. Now, the music video is called All Is Full of Love, and these robots are going to start kissing. I think the fluid is going to be some sort of arousal stand-in, right? I think when you look at some of these broader shots of this kind of stuff, it gets a bit intimate, it gets a little bit sexy, and then you get into stuff like this. So I think that is what the point of the fluid is something to visualize these robots falling in love. But it's open to interpretation. What do you think the droplets mean? You tell me. Something I mentioned in, I think, both of the videos I've done so far is when you're making a film, especially a short concept film like a music video or a commercial, always think about what is your wow shot. A DOP that I work with a lot and a good friend of mine sort of put me onto this when we did a piece at the start of last year where we were storyboarding this thing that we were going to shoot, and we were just shooting it in my studio here with us as like a test film before we actually got on set with the talent. And we figured out how to get into the story in like 3 shots, and then the 4th shot to me was like, oh, that's a little bit boring, isn't it? It's just like a sort of, straight on. It was this frame basically. It was like a straight on shot of the talent, and he was like, yeah, but you want a thumbnail and you want something that's going to go on the website. You need like talent front and center, and for that film that was one of the wow shots. This is definitely the wow shot of this film. If you were going to say, like, if you wanted to put this film in like a magazine, let's say, of most inspirational music videos, this would be your banner, right? You would have like Chris Cunningham for Björk written across this here. It's just one of the most visually interesting compositions. It's got a sense of humanity in it. People always bring a shot to life. The symmetry, the composition, the division in the frames, like, this is something that when you're showing off your work, you want to make sure that this shot is in your piece. Doesn't have to be composition, doesn't have to be people, doesn't have to be, you figure out what's right for your thing, but you want to make sure that there is a wow shot in there so that you can put it in your reel and show it off. My final takeaway is, think about the end of your film taking place in a different world than the beginning of the film. Think about how you are going to elevate and transition the audience from whatever that beginning world is through maybe just 1, maybe 2, maybe 5, depends on how long your film is, intermediary worlds, and end in a world that is different than the one you began in. Whether that's narratively, whether that's in terms of character development, whether that's in terms of aesthetic, I kind of think the more the merrier, so long as it all makes sense and resonates with the script, if it fits for the film. But think about how you can take a film from the place it begins and ensure that it ends in a different place. My example being here that we started this whole film in this kind of high key world, and then we get to the kind of 3rd act and we've inverted the palette, right? All of a sudden we're in low key world and there's a lot of flashing, and the ideas now are different. We're thinking about these 2 robots being together. We're not thinking about this robot getting built anymore. Again, all this like weird sexual fluid imagery. But we're in dark world now. So it's a simple development in this idea. It's start off light, end dark. But you can take that and put it onto stuff that you like. So think about films that you've seen, or music videos that you really like, or commercials that you've seen. How do they develop from beginning to end? If you take the before and the end shot of something that you really like, or like sort of, the first scene and the end scene of a movie, and put them together and think about what's different between the characters, what's different between the locations, what has happened in the in-between. I'll give you a film example. So one of my favourite films is Falling Down. He starts off as a white-collar guy. And he's just hot in his car and he's fed up and there's other stuff going on at home. But the whole film is him just kind of doing the, what if I just go mad? What if I just go on one fantasy? By the end of the film, I think he's broken his glasses. He's wearing like a green army cargo jacket thing. He's got an Uzi and he finds himself on Santa Monica Pier. So make sure that stuff happens in the middle. Whether it's just you invert the palette of your film so that things go from light to dark, or the main character of your film decides he is sick of Mackie's looking nice on the poster and crap when you get it on the tray and goes on a rampage through Los Angeles. It's really up to you. But this is how Chris Cunningham put a little bit of that into his Björk music video, and I think there's a lot we can take away from it.